All right, let's start here. We'll go AFC and then NFC. We'll start with the big fish here in Tom Brady, who is going to be free. Juked everybody out with his little Hulu ad that he had where he
nice
posted a
ad.
picture of him walking out of the tunnel. I wrote down most likely New England. I still think at his age, 42, you really want to go to a new place, learn a new system, all that stuff. It doesn't make a ton of sense to me. So to me, I thought New England's still the favorite. And then for the second team, I actually put Las Vegas in the Raiders. I know the Chargers have been mentioned a lot with Tom Brady. I just think Las Vegas, for where he is right now, and their offensive line, I think, is a little bit ahead of where the Chargers' offensive line is. I think the Chargers have much more weapons to play with. But I think as you get older, mobility is a problem. I would think he would probably steer a little bit more towards having that protection in a run game to help him out a little bit.
Yeah, I think here's the thing when it comes to Tom Brady, and I think the tough thing that everyone has when it comes to evaluating him is, like, we all understand the resume and the reputation and all of that stuff, and so you're trying to keep that in perspective while also looking at the player that we saw last year who didn't have a really good year, who began to show signs of decline, significant signs of decline. And so when you talk about the team that would be best suited to take him, I would say it's the New England Patriots. One of the reasons why is because they've seen the best of Tom Brady, and each and every day they've also seen where he's lacking, where he's weak at. And the thing that New England has always been able to do, they've been able to take players and put them in the best situation for them to succeed. Now, for Tom Brady last year, they didn't necessarily have the weapons around him to elevate him and to help him play at a high level. So if they choose to go down this road where they bring Tom Brady back and they bring him back on a $30 million plus deal, the only way to enable Tom Brady to look like Tom Brady of old is they really have to invest in the playmakers on the outside. And it can't be draft picks. It can't be guys that they're kind of pulling off the street at market rates, at bargain basement rates. They have to pay big money to find some guys that can come right in and be right now players in a system that can be complex and complicated for veteran receivers to pick up, because there is so much that takes place after the snap.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what he ends up doing. I think that New England, I think we both agree on that. New England's probably the most likely scenario in that he returns there. They've got to upgrade the weaponry around him, but I wouldn't sleep on the Chargers. I would not sleep on the Raiders. We'll see what happens there. Interesting one as we go down through the AFC here. Cincinnati, we all assume Joe Burrow will be the first overall pick. That puts Andy Dalton potentially on the block. They could move on from him. And the two teams I wrote down, number one, I still stuck with Cincinnati because I think Andy's like the perfect bridge quarterback. I mean, if you were going to describe the perfect bridge quarterback, you'd describe Alex Smith. And I think Andy Dalton's very similar there. I think he would be very helpful to a young quarterback, even if Andy, wasn't even starting. If he was just there as the kind of that mentor role, I think he would do well in that spot there in Cincinnati. But the other one I wrote down, this might surprise people, I wrote down Philadelphia, because no team has shown over the years, and no team is a greater example of having invested money in the backup quarterback position. Carson Wentz, as good as he is, Buck, has had his injury issues. So they've invested. First, they invested in Chase Daniel. Then, obviously, Nick Foles, and that paid off with the Super Bowl. Howie Roseman believes in spending money at that backup quarterback position so that your season does not collapse if something happens to your starter. And in this case, with Carson's injury history, it's even a wiser investment. You need to invest in that backup quarterback. And I think Andy Dalton underneath Doug Peterson, they might be able to kind of polish him up a little bit and give him a chance to go on, as Nick Foles did, and cash in somewhere else down the line.
Man, it's funny. I like both scenarios. And I like both scenarios for a few different reasons. I love it in Cincinnati. And I'm going to say this, and I know I'm going to get some pushback from it. If you keep him in the fold and you enable him to kind of be the mentor to Joe Burrow, I think you have a seamless transition from one starting quarterback to the next. I like the Philadelphia situation, but I have another scenario. How about the New England Patriots? I know it was rumored that would be a potential destination for him. But if you think about Tom Brady departing New England and what Bill Belichick typically likes to do, he likes to have a smart, cerebral, effective quarterback who can manage the game, who understands how to play it. We can say a lot of things about Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton understands how to play the game, and he can play a winning way. I would say that he would benefit from having maybe an upgrade in coaching in terms of the other parts of building a complementary format that would allow him to win.
The next one here, Buck, I don't know if there's any other option. Ryan Tannehill is going to be a Tennessee Titan. I can't envision any scenario in which he's not a Tennessee Titan next year.
No, the way that he played down the stretch, the way that he sparked the offense, the synergy and connection that he has, not only with the rest of the team, but more particular, the way he and Derrick Henry are kind of that 1-2 punch on offense. I love the way that Arthur Smith put this offense together with Ryan Tannehill.
Yeah, to me, it's just a matter of whether or not you want a short-term situation go year by year, or whether you feel confident enough to invest in him long-term. That, to me, is the decision with Ryan Tannehill there with the Tennessee Titans. We go on now to a really interesting one with Phillip Rivers, and I think we're going to find out very soon what his situation is with the Los Angeles Chargers. Maybe by the time you listen to this, who knows, you might know what's going on there. But we'll see. I wrote down the two teams I wrote down, and the first one might surprise some people. I wrote down Indy because when you look at the Colts, this is a team from Rivers' standpoint makes a lot of sense. You've got a head coach there in Frank Reich, who you have a great relationship with, who coached you there with the Chargers previously. I believe he's an upgrade over Jacoby Brissett. It would be a great offensive line in front of him, one that he hasn't played behind since going back to the old Charger days early on in his career. So I think you get protected. He's also going to be playing 9 games indoors. You count the road game there in Houston every year, minimum. As you start to lose a little bit on your arm strength, I think that could prolong his career. And it's a team that's ready to win right now. So I actually put the Colts down there at the first position, and I put the Chargers down there in the second position. But I think, look, we're going to know really soon what the Chargers' plans are.
So here's what's interesting. I actually love the scenario. And I didn't love it when I first heard it, when I thought about it, because I was like, man, Phillip Rivers, like the turnovers this year really bothered me. Did he fall off the cliff? But then I just think about Frank Reich. And I think a couple of things why Frank Reich would be the right coach for Phillip Rivers at this stage of his career. One, Frank Reich played the position. Frank Reich has a clear understanding because he played so long in the league. He kind of understands how guys kind of mature as quarterbacks and how they eventually begin to fade to black. I think what he can do is kind of stem some of the deterioration that maybe we've seen from Phillip Rivers' game in terms of like the carelessness with the ball and those things. And then what Frank Reich also will do is what he did with Andrew Luck. He'll protect him by making sure that the running game is a factor.
Next one, Marcus Mariota. Obviously, we talked about Ryan Tannehill being the future there for the Tennessee Titans, so what does that mean for Mariota? To me, Buck, I thought West Coast. Get him back to the West Coast. Get him in a place where he can kind of collect himself. And I look at two teams. I put the Chargers down. You've got Tyrod Taylor there. I think Marcus Mariota, you talk about changing your dynamic from Phillip Rivers being a pure pocket passer to being guys that are mobile and threats with their legs. I think that Mariota, that could be a good fit for him there. I think he'd have a good chance to beat out Tyrod Taylor there. And with all the weapons they have in place, and then using his mobility to get away from some of the issues as they continue to develop this offensive line would make sense. And then I put down San Francisco. Jimmy Garoppolo, I don't think they're necessarily going to look to replace Jimmy Garoppolo, Buck. I think he played well on the whole. I think he missed a couple throws in the Super Bowl, but I don't think it's, bring him in there just to say, hey, we've got a little competition here for you, and then let Kyle Shanahan work with Marcus Mariota. Think back to the Shanahans when RG3 came into the league and what they were able to do with him.
How about another scenario? Because when Marcus Mariota was coming out of Oregon, I compared him to Alex Smith. The guy who helped Alex Smith continue to rehab his image as a starting quarterback, yes, it was Jim Harbaugh. But, man, he did a lot of work in Kansas City under Andy Reid. When you think about Pat Mahomes and Pat Mahomes being everything right now, why not take a year or two to learn how to play the position, learn while also watching one of the best young quarterbacks that we've seen in Pat Mahomes? I think Kansas City would be a great fit for Marcus Mariota.
Marcus Mariota's 26 years old, Buck. I mean, he's still got a lot ahead of him.
Got a lot of juice. And if one thing I know about Andy, and this is something that everyone that worked under Coach Mike Holmgren has done, you can never collect enough quarterbacks.
Next one on the list, Buck. I wrote down Derek Carr. And, look, I don't know what's going to happen with Derek Carr. He could very well move to Las Vegas, move into that house that he's building right next to John Gruden. But just when you listen to the public comments that are out there, Buck, I do not get an overwhelming sense of support there with Derek Carr. And so when I look at that, I could see them trying, they've got assets. The Oakland Raiders have money and they have draft picks. So they've got avenues where they could go out and get a veteran. We've already talked about Tom Brady potentially. They could go into the draft. We'll get to those guys here in a little bit. But if they do decide to move on from Derek Carr, I mean, really, I can cut and paste everything you said about Andy Dalton going to the New England Patriots, and I would just cut and paste it to Derek Carr.
That's a good idea. The only thing that I worry about when it comes to Derek Carr and Bill Belichick, and I can't get it, I can't get a full sense of this, but I wonder about the toughness. You know, like I kind of feel like at that position, like the toughness. Is he tough enough to endure the stuff that will come along with it? Because not only like,
and you're not talking physically, you're not talking
just the grind, the mental stuff or whatever. Because whoever steps in to replace TB12, like, you have to have enough resolve and grit and mental toughness to endure all the criticism that is going to come. Because remember, they're going to romanticize Tom Brady when he leaves. And so with every mistake, every bad game, every so-so performance, you're going to be compared to number 12.
Yeah, my thing with Derek is just I just want to see him just embrace kind of that attack mode. You know, you see glimpses of it and you get excited, but then he kind of gets back in and is a little bit too cautious and too conservative. I think there's a happy medium in there somewhere to be found, like the scale, right, between a Jameis Winston and a Derek Carr. Can you find something in the middle there, you know, without being reckless, but being a little more aggressive? I think that's my frustration, because I do see glimpses of him showing that ability. I just want to see him continue to show me that aggressive attacking style that I wish we had a little bit more of. When we get to the Dallas Cowboys, Buck, that's Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott's not leaving Dallas. Dallas is not going to let that one get away. One way or the other, he'll be a Cowboy.
No, I think he's built for it. And they have all the levers. Like, they can drop the franchise tag on him. They can sign him to a long-term deal. So regardless, we're going to see Dak Prescott with the Dallas Cowboys. I'm actually excited to see it, because I'm excited to see what Mike McCarthy actually does with Dak Prescott.
Yeah, I'd be excited. If I was a Cowboy fan, I know they've got a ton of free agents. They've got to figure out who they're going to pay here. But I do feel like Dak Prescott, he's just getting going here. He's going to be a very good player for them for the next decade. They've got their guy. They'll take care of him. Don't worry about it. Now we get to an interesting one here, Buck. Cam Newton. Cam Newton there, coming off injury with the Carolina Panthers. You've got, obviously, new coach there, Matt Rule, who gets a 7-year contract, so you know he is not going anywhere. You've got a relatively new owner. This, to me, a lot of things point to, okay, we're going in a new direction, starting over. Can they, see what they can potentially get for a Cam Newton? But having said that, I think when they kind of look at what their options are, where they're picking in the draft, who they'd be able to be in on in free agency, I don't see an upgrade, Buck. So I have Carolina being the most likely that he returns there. And then the second team I wrote down just because I thought it would be fun. I don't see the Bears giving up on Mitch Trubisky anytime soon. I think they're very much committed to him, try and get him healthy in the offseason, hope he can bounce back and have a better year. But Matt Nagy, having spent that time under Andy Reid, I think he would be a fun, creative outlet to use Cam Newton, provided we see the Cam Newton return to the health that we saw him previously.
I have another scenario, and so you're really close to this team. How about the L.A. Chargers? And here's why I would say Cam Newton potentially with the L.A. Chargers. I know Tyrod Taylor is there, but you're the L.A. Chargers. You're in L.A. L.A. demands a little showtime. They demand a little star power. The second scenario would be the Washington Redskins. And on paper, it doesn't look like a great fit because, look, they just drafted a guy in Dwayne Haskins. What typically happens when you are a head coach and you get full autonomy to run the personnel department, what you typically do is you fall back in love with the guys that you've always had around you. And so I could see Ron Rivera kind of still having loving eyes for Cam Newton.
Yeah, again, Buck, I'd come back to the original point, though. I mean, do you see who's Carolina going to get that's better right now?
I don't know. That's always been the thing. That's always been the thing. And I know we can talk about like ushering in a change and a new culture. And look, Kuechly is gone, Greg Olsen is gone, so it appears that the next domino to fall would be Cam Newton. But Matt Rule has to look around and say, hey, someone has to take a snap, and that someone has to have some credibility.
This is interesting. We'll see what Drew Brees decides to do. The interesting thing to me is if Drew Brees decides to retire. All right, let's just say, potentially does that. He played well last year, but if he does decide to retire, I think it's Taysom Hill. I know Teddy was undefeated in his little stretch there, but I think Sean Payton wants to see what he can do with Taysom Hill and how creative he can be. I think it might be a 2-quarterback situation, but I would think it'll be Taysom Hill as the 1A part of a 2-quarterback situation.
Yeah. It'd be interesting because, like, you heard Drew Brees talk about that two-quarterback situation in terms of, like, hey, if I took 30 snaps and Taysom took another 20 and we did some of those things, like, maybe, just maybe, it could work out. I do believe Sean Payton is fascinated by Taysom Hill. He's fascinated by being able to do some of the new school stuff. And I think with Taysom Hill and some of the stuff that he's flashed, maybe, just maybe, we do see the combination of number 9 and number 7 kind of sharing the duties as a quarterback in New Orleans.
The tempting thing about Teddy, like, to me, I look at the Chargers. If you're the Chargers and you can get Teddy Bridgewater, not only do you get a young player who's played at a very high level, he's a distributor, right? So you've got the weapons there. He can distribute the football. He's not going to turn it over, which you knew was a frustration for Anthony Lynn. If you get a Teddy Bridgewater, now you've freed yourself up with that 6th pick to do what I'm most enticed by, having watched this Chargers team and being an NFL fan. Man, I would give me Isaiah Simmons and let him and Derwin James just wreak havoc on the back end of that defense with 2 versatile chess pieces. And now you've got Bosa, you've got Ingram coming back, you've got pass rushers, and you've got 2 of the more athletic, versatile players in the NFL with those 2 guys. And now you've got Teddy Bridgewater. You're protecting the football. He's efficient. When I look at all these options, if I'm the Chargers, I think I put Teddy Bridgewater right at the top of my list.
Hey, one other team that I would mention with Teddy Bridgewater, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers would be a team that you would have to consider because you saw Bruce Arians growing increasingly more frustrated with the turnovers from Jameis Winston. I mean, you talk about 30 interceptions. With the weapons that they have on the outside, really you're telling your quarterback, hey, man, just don't mess this up. Just don't give it away to the other team.
Well, that gets us to Tampa, and that gets us to Jameis Winston. Buck, I still – look, I still put Tampa down as the favorite that he returns there. To me, that makes probably the most sense when you look at all these different options. But I put the Raiders down there as well, and that's what I referenced earlier of trying to find that happy medium. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe you bring in Jameis Winston with Derek Carr, put them together, and hope Derek Carr and his conservative nature rubs off on Jameis, and hope Jameis's aggressive nature rubs off on Derek Carr, and then it's just let's have a competition here. Let's see who comes out of this thing.
Look, the leadership skills are there. The fearlessness and the courage and the toughness, all those things are there. His biggest issue is he is careless and reckless with the football. Maybe John Gruden says, I can put him in a situation where I coach him hard and I can fix that part of his game.
Let's go just quick pace here because we're going to have a lot more time to talk about these draft guys as we go through the process. But just kind of as we stand right now, very early on, the two or three teams that make the most sense for these players. I'll run through the top, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 quarterbacks here and kind of give you my two teams. And then kind of just after I get through this list, Buck, kind of highlight which ones you like or which fits you'd like to change here. Burrow, Cincinnati is the obvious one. I put Miami down there just as a second in case, they have all the firepower. If they were in love with him, I don't think the Cincinnati Bengals will trade off of one, but they're the one team with the firepower to get up there if they wanted to. Tua, Miami, and the Chargers that make the most sense to me with him. Herbert, the Chargers, and the Lions. There's some buzz on the streets that the Lions really like Justin Herbert. That's why I mentioned that one. Jordan Love, the Colts and the Raiders, high upside, low floor, a little bit of a wild card, but a lot to work with there. You trust your guys to develop quarterbacks with Frank Reich and with John Gruden. Very confident they could get it out of him. Jake Fromm from Georgia, staying in Atlanta, backing up Matt Ryan to eventually take over, playing indoors, which I think would benefit him. And then I put Miami in the second round as kind of, hey, let's get impact players early on. We take Jake Fromm in the second round if they're not comfortable with Tua's injury. And then Jacob Eason, Tampa Bay, our buddy Lance Zierlein's been beating that drum for a while. And then I put Carolina down there, and that to me would be Carolina probably in the second round as somebody just, okay, we're not going to get a quarterback. We don't like one here early. Let's see if we can get a guy like Jacob Eason there in the second round.
Look, man, of all those things, Joe Burrow, the only other team that I would throw in there would be Carolina because of the natural relationship with Joe Brady. You just talked about a scenario. Maybe Cincinnati wants to get back. Maybe you can dangle Cam Newton out there. Maybe, just maybe, they kind of fall for it. I don't know. Tua, I think the L.A. Chargers are the perfect fit. West Coast presence. He comes from Hawaii. Not only that, but when you look at him, in my mind, he still kind of reminds me of Drew Brees, quick rhythm thrower, all the weapons that they have on the outside. He literally can just put the ball in the hands of the playmakers and let them do their thing on the perimeter. Justin Herbert, I think, really helped himself with his performance at the Senior Bowl throughout the week. Not necessarily anything that he did on the field, but his interaction with his teammates, with the way he handled business behind the scenes. I think you could see a scenario where the Detroit Lions fall in love with him based on watching him interact and saying, like, hey, this is the future of our franchise, and what could we get back from Matthew Stafford if we put him on the open market when you think about building and rebuilding a squad. Justin, like, Love is interesting to me because Indianapolis is great. Then you talk about the Las Vegas Raiders, the John Gruden loving it. Two teams that I would bring up, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because Bruce Arians loves a gunslinger. And then I just continue to think about New Orleans. And some of this has to do with, like, people have made the light. I'm not saying these comparisons are valid, but the light comparisons between Love's game and Pat Mahomes. Yeah. Imagine Sean Payton thinking, hey, you know what? I would like to do some of the things that I saw in the Super Bowl with Love from, I think you hit the nail on the head, the wild card. And I just had this conversation last night with a scouting buddy of mine, Jacob Eason. He was like, I don't understand. He said, look, man, I went through your mock draft and, like, I was okay with it. He said, the names that kind of popped up to me, he's like, I wasn't really in love with the Love thing. He's like, how come Eason isn't in your deal? He's like, when I look at him, I think he might be the third or the fourth best quarterback in the deal. He's like, you may want to continue to pay close attention to it. And he said, I'm not the only one on the streets that has a fascination for what this kid could be. So, look, with Eason, and I think it'll be really important when we get to the combine, when people get a chance to really see Eason throw and they see the talent, you could see some conversation and some buzz build about Eason.
All right, Buck, this has been a lot of fun, man. I think this is a nice jumping off episode here for us as we go into the off season, man. It's gonna be fun. We got a ton of guys here still to watch here to get ready for the combine, but free agency is gonna be around the corner here before you know it. So, man, that was a lot of fun going through that today.